Welcome to Practical Shamanism. I'm Katie Weatherup. I'm a former engineer with 20 years of experience working as a shamanic practitioner, and I hope to help you to connect to your personal power and magic and to support you in living a really good life that just keeps getting better. Thank you so much for joining me. One of the things that matters really deeply to a lot of the people I work with is feeling like they're in right relationship to their soul purpose, that they're on track for this intention that their soul had for being here and having this experience. It seems like the use of language in this case, where a lot of other people use it, is as something that is held by a higher, wiser part of themselves, and this master plan that their human self that's wearing the veils of separation is muddling their way toward and through. And people are wanting to know if they're missing some critical piece of information about it. I tend to treat soul purpose more like a collaboration and a dialogue. So I feel like the human part of myself that's here and now, navigating and doing my life with all the knowledge and wisdom I've accumulated of being on the planet in a time that is very different from what it's been like to be on the planet at other times, is in conversation with the eternal part of myself. And ideally, they're working out a really up-to-date, aligned, contemporary, vibrant intention for how my life is going to go. And my desire is at the end of my life, when I'm sitting with my soul committee doing a life review, I'm lit up with joy about what the journey included, about the pain that I've released, about the density, about the patterns I've broken, about the innovation I've had, about the new ways that I've moved through the world. And so if you're wanting to live a life with this relationship to soul purpose, where soul purpose is in play, whether you're using the previous definition or whether I've enticed you over to feeling like my definition might have some relevance, it's really helpful to have a conversation with each of the chakras. And you may feel like this isn't relevant to talk to your root chakra or your sacral chakra because, hey, the crown chakra is most connected to your soul purpose. But what I would like to offer is that if you don't have a both and, a life that's working really well for your human self and that's really aligned for your soul, there's going to be tension and conflict and a level that you're at war with yourself. And anyone who's ever been frozen in a procrastination cycle or unable to make an important decision can relate to how exhausting and depleting it is to be in argument with yourself rather than able to move forward. And so I would encourage you to seek this concept of a both and, a life that is really well lived from the point of view of your soul, from your higher self, from the part of you that's eternal, as well as a life that's really well lived from your human self, where your human self feels fulfilled and well and like it has an environment that it can thrive in. I'm not usually a fan of using the language self-sabotage, but if you've ever had a vision that you were really lit up about, maybe it was a health change, maybe it was an important trip, and then you found that something happened to get in the way, and maybe it was something that you did to yourself. So for me, for example, I might get sick, but before I get sick, I might be eating way more sugar and staying up way too late reading and not really exercising, and then I get a cold. So the tension of that is me not being harmonious enough with myself that parts of me are struggling. So parts of me are struggling to meet important needs in a way that doesn't have the bigger picture. So my instincts might encourage me to eat high caloric density food because that's their response to stress. But big picture, too much of that is not so optimal for me. So the thing to know about trying to chart a life path, if you haven't taken counsel with all of your chakras, is that the tug-a-war and the struggle and the fight that happens if you're forcing yourself into something that is too scary. One of the facilitators of a seminar that I went to said, we're looking to lean into the edge of personal growth, not impale ourselves on the point of it. And her counsel and her framing of the experience was, it's great to push yourself out of your comfort zone. It's great to innovate. It's great to try new things. But if you push yourself too far out, the backlash and the fallout of feeling unsafe and the way that it kind of undermines self-trust, if you fling yourself into things that you're not emotionally or psychologically prepared for to too great a degree, ends up costing more than any benefit that you gain from it. And so while one step forward, two steps back, or two steps forward, one step back is sometimes the way of it, it's nice if we are moving in harmony with ourselves. And so one of the really powerful questions that you can ask yourself is, what would my root chakra need to be aligned with my soul purpose? What would my root chakra need to be able to take some of its attention off its individual needs and allow space for needs for other levels of me to come into play? And when we ask a question, our brain wants to leap forward with an immediate answer, and it's not always true. Our thinking mind kind of abhors silence, and we don't really train our thinking mind in sitting with silence unless you have a pretty serious meditation practice, which if so, yay you. So the quick answer, allow it to arise, but know that it may not be the best or the truest or the richest answer. And if you've had a part of yourself that you have disowned or disenfranchised or don't want to hear from, you can end up having a little bit of time and waiting and intention before the answer will bubble to the surface. So I've been in a subtle low-level argument with myself where my authentic emotional reaction to a level of circumstances was not resolving in the way that I wanted it to. And lots of the compassionate people who love me have said, Katie, that's a big thing. It's reasonable that you aren't getting to peace and calmness, and you really feel like you need the circumstances to change before you feel that way. And I've had this tension because I do what I do. I have a lot of wisdom. I have a lot of access. Life is good at the level of circumstance. So a lot of self-frustration that I wasn't able to just make a shift. And so in a way, I wasn't necessarily asking this kind of question about like, what would these parts of me need to make a shift? The parts of me that were feeling unsafe, even though it wasn't true at the level of fact, due to a particular situation. So it's powerful to just hang with this kind of a question, to just let it bubble around in the background, to take some notes, to have something to write things down. I like to use the Notes app on my smartphone to jot down inspiration as it comes in. And then you can move on to your sacral chakra with the same question. What would I need in my life to have the sacral chakra really aligned with my soul purpose, really feeling like it had enough of what it needed to thrive in life so that the focus didn't need to be on meeting its needs? And move through all of the different chakras, because there's some really important, valuable information that will be revealed about what's in the way. Because if you assume that if there's something that really magnetizes our soul, if we're not moving toward it, there's probably something that's in the way. And unmet needs for other chakras are often in the way, and we often prioritize needs somewhat related to Maslow's pyramid of needs. It's not the only way people prioritize needs. Sometimes it's just, what are you the hungriest for? So people will be hungry for connection and spend huge amounts of money they don't have, or excitement, or, something where they make an unsustainable choice in the moment, desperately trying to meet that need. So it's not always Maslow's pyramid of needs, but the idea with that is that if you have a soul purpose, but you're not tending enough to surviving, which up until very recently has taken a great deal of an individual human's time and focus for most people most of the time, if you died because you went hungry or didn't watch out for panthers leaping down from trees to eat you. If you didn't survive, it was game over. You wouldn't get to experience and explore all these other things. And it takes a lot of effort to incarnate and to come into a body. And it's kind of a slow process as a human to grow up and learn to walk and talk and, be in a tribe and whatever the mores and the education are of the time. There's a lot that goes into it. So we don't want to throw our lives away casually. So we have a lot of circuitry that is wanting us to be very conservative about danger, and I would argue that our instincts need adult supervision so they don't run amok, so they don't make us fearful when all is well at the level of fact. So once you've gathered all of this information, you've had conversations with all 7 of your chakras, you can ask, is there any other part of me that wants to speak up? Sometimes there's a part that doesn't move as much with the chakras. And so there might be a balance of masculine and feminine. So the feminine might say, I'd love to write this amazing book, but I don't want to give up downtime. I don't want to have more hustle in my life. I already have enough hustle and enough doing. Or maybe the masculine's going to say, I'm also really committed to this career advancement, or I've committed myself to being a really good dad and I want to hold on to that. So I'll do this thing, but if I'm going to start it now, it needs to fit with being a really good parent to the children that I want to have. That's part of the soul purpose that's already in play, that's already happening and on the table. So from all this really cool information, regardless of soul purpose, you can start to have a life that is really well balanced, that you really have the map of what you need to survive and thrive. So what gives you enough of a sense of safety, enough of a sense of being financially resourced? And enough is a really important concept, because when chakras are operating independently and in an adversarial relationship, there's never enough. There's never enough safety. There's never enough heart connection. There's never enough visioning and inspiration. I have to deliberately close the channels when I stop podcasting, because I have amazing teams of guides that are just about me sharing their wisdom through my podcast. And so even if I've been talking for an hour and a half, there's still more inspiration, and I need to balance the needs of the body by having some movement and having some food and focusing on something else. And so in navigating this, you want to pay attention to what would be enough. And there's an invitation to bring your inner wise person to the surface. So a lot of times our inner child ends up in the driver's seat, and it's okay. Like, that part should definitely get to weigh in and have counsel. If you don't have enough playfulness or unstructured time or freedom in your life, there's going to be a lot of tension and grumpiness and challenge, very much like an overstructured toddler gets grumpy, overstructured grown-ups get grumpy as well. So in this negotiation, when you start to map out your life, it can give you a sense of direction, and you can prioritize the things that are the most actionable. Like, I'm losing the most energy and freedom because I don't have my money world in order. The money is really scary and a struggle. Okay, I should put some attention, and not just your physical doing action, but also your visioning and your manifestation. Because the cool thing about our soul intention and our higher self is, as long as it's not against something that would be good for us. So, for example, if someone's gotten really caught up in perceived social value, I want to have super high status, and super high status isn't in service to some bigger vision. Maybe you have a soul contract to just get to be super high status and have that diversity of experience, but I haven't met the person with that soul contract. And so if your mind is all about being perceived as more beautiful and more rich and more youthful and more charismatic and having important friends that you can name drop at parties and impress people, your soul may not be super aligned with supporting that, especially if it's taking you away from other things and it's become all consuming. Or if you never feel like you have enough safety, your soul's probably down with getting you to enough safety, but not the illusion of more and more and more safety. So it's a nuanced stance, but in general, our resourcefulness and our magic and our team of guides are all really available to be in service to what would be the right circumstances for you to really thrive? What would be the right connections? What would be the right home environment? And so a lot of times we like the narratives and the story of some heroic effort where you give up everything to have something. And those are great stories. Like my favorite podcasters are Kara and Nate, who are this couple who sold everything they owned, ran up a bunch of frequent flyer miles, and set off to travel the world. And it turned into this amazing YouTube channel and business that they're vlogging their travels, and they've been wildly successful monetarily, but also in terms of the life experience they really valued. And they've made those big sacrifices of, not getting to have so many clothes with them because they're living out of suitcases for months and months on end. And, but for most of us, there's a way to do our soul purpose that is congruent with a life that really works for us. So we don't have to trade a comfortable life for some vision that we're in service to. Sometimes we do, but a lot of times we don't. And I think many of the people I work with are very much of the both and. You can have a life that's really conducive for your human self. You're not overindulging your human self. You're not under listening to your human self. And then you can free up a lot of energy to be in service to your soul purpose. Sometimes the soul purpose really is getting good at the game of being human at a level that you haven't done before. So maybe you're new to trading your time and talent for money. Maybe you were part of a religious order and somebody else handled the money. Or maybe you're new to romantic relationships. I think for me, the fact that we have the freedom of sexual expression that we do in the modern era, we have the ability to not get pregnant, at least in most first world countries, in most places, not everywhere, but most of the time. We have this ability to have safer sex. There's some really neat things that open up. And we have a society that'll, be a little bit grumbly and shaming about, what you do with your own body. But in general, it's a lot safer. You're not at risk of being stoned to death, for example. So there's this enormous freedom from what in the past were some really terrible consequences. So the joy of getting to have this important part of the experience may be really, really precious to certain souls. That may be a big part of what the point is, to learn something new, to fully experience some other aspect of life. So going through and really working with the different chakras and letting your wisdom bubble to the surface about what a life well lived would mean to each of your chakras is really useful. What would make it feel relaxed and safe and well, and having the right amount of stimulation and having the right amount of what's in it for that chakra. Because some people, like I said, have a lot of pendulum swings in their life where basically the chakra yelling the loudest gets the attention or the action, but it's a short-sighted action that creates ripples of needs less met. So that would be like working a horrible job that was an abusive environment, that was hours that were bad for your body and left you exhausted and depleted because the money was really good. And then the pendulum swing of I hate being here happens, and you scream at your boss and storm out in dramatic fashion without really having a financial plan. Meanwhile, probably having gone through a bunch more discretionary spending because you were trying to offset how unhappy the job was, so you may not even have the financial reserves created by the job. Like that's kind of a common pattern or flow that people sometimes find themselves in. So soul purpose is subtle and often comes behind what is urgent and critical. So as a young woman, I read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the things that I really liked was this concept of the axis from not urgent to urgent and important to not important. And we spend a lot of time on urgent but not important. So if we're compelled to seek some stimulation by browsing Facebook or grab a phone call from someone who's, randomly calling us, that has urgency, but it might not be important. Whereas we sometimes don't get to important but not urgent. And I would argue that unless there's a part of us that's just screamingly loud, soul purpose can often feel really important but not urgent. And so we're working to align our life where we've kind of dealt with the important, urgent things that are important to us having a good quality of life. And then we free up space for this subtle information to come in. Another way of saying this is if things are really loud and intense in the background, if there's a lot of things that we're reacting to and responding to, our biochemistry gets kind of stirred up. There's a lot more activation. And when we're having high levels of emotionality or fight or flight response, we really can't hear our subtle wisdom. So the compass by which we can sort of feel into warmer and colder works a lot better if we don't have any chakra that's screaming that needs are unmet. And there's a lot of nuance to this. Sometimes our old wounding makes a particular chakra a bottomless pit. Like if you haven't cleaned up certain things about how you were mirrored back to yourself, no amount of accolades or appreciation or admiration is quite going to do it for you as far as feeling like, okay, I have enough respect, I have enough esteem. So the enough place is definitely a movement of health and maturity and clarity. And if there are places where it's never enough, that is something to go in the healing direction with. So there's a lot of things that can really be revealed in potent ways by taking the time to do this simple exercise. Just being and walking with the question of, what would really, really work for this particular chakra? What would need to be true in my life for this chakra to be really happy to be here, really enthusiastic, and enough needs met that it could relax around constantly trying to get its needs met and have space for supporting a soul purpose, for supporting a way that I may feel called to move that isn't all that interesting to this chakra. So there are things that I do that really make good money, and those are very appealing to my root chakra, but I'm making enough money that when I have a passion project that probably isn't going to make me money at all, probably isn't going to help with that, but I get to express something or share something that I feel compelled to express or share, my root chakra is not going to freak out. It's going to be pretty chill. It'll just ground me while I do whatever it is that I'm up to. So I want to offer this as a way to make things quiet enough. I'm remembering the thing where if you ever did the thing where you cleaned your apartment when you were studying for finals, I certainly did that. And it was sort of about making the room quiet enough. So I got food in the house, I cleaned things, I lined up my world, I laid out my textbooks, I gathered everything I needed. So there were no distractions, nothing was pulling my focus. And then I could really dive into the very, very focused work I needed to do, which was stuffing enough information into my short-term memory to pass the classes that I was committed to passing. So I just want to offer that in a more life-serving, cohesive way, that quieting any major deficits or misalignments as best you can is going to make a lot more space. And if there's an urgent and critical problem to solve, like if you're dealing with, a major health issue, your attention should probably be on that. You can cycle back to what you're passionate and inspired by and want to experience next once you get the waters leveled. Now, I know this is very generic, so there are lots of exceptions to this wisdom, but in general, it's a pretty sound principle to get your life working well and in a way that doesn't take all of your energy and attention, and then see what you want to do with the rest. See what in your deepest, quietest parts you're compelled and excited to do with the energy that's left over. Thank you so much for joining me. To learn more about me and my work, please visit my website at handsoverheart.com. There you can join my mailing list for access to free bonus content in the members-only area. If you've enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. It would help me out a lot. Also, a special thank you to my patrons for your support. You offer me the time freedom to work on passion projects like this one. If you'd like to receive personal shamanic support from me and my team of guides, please consider joining my Patreon community. You'll find the link below. And again, thank you so much for listening. This is Katie Weatherup, wishing you wholeness and happiness.